Jason Fladlien here. I got an interesting video for you today. 4 lessons from 4 consulting clients of mine who have since passed on from this world into the next world. So these are lessons that never got to be completed with these particular clients, but I was thinking about how it would look like if it were completed, and there was some really interesting insights into what we did for each of these clients. And so I'm going to break those down for you here. If you like these, subscribe at any point in time. Now, 4 titans of industry, 4 different industries, 4 different niches, 4 different strategies. Let's get at it. The first one is a gentleman calls me up one day and he has some very sobering news. He says, Jason, nobody really knows this outside of my family, but I have a form of cancer that is pretty much a death sentence. And I don't have a whole bunch of time left, but I have these 2 companies that I've built and I want them to sustain themselves and grow after I've passed because I have 3 children that I need to take care of here. If I had to really call on somebody to help me specifically, like who's the best of the best, it's you. So I'm asking you, will you come down and do some consulting with me on this? So he hired me, paid me my fee, and I went down to San Diego. And this gentleman was named Andy Jenkins. And you probably know of his companies if you're in this space because he has 2 major companies. One is Webinar Jam. The other is Kartra. And the specific focus of the call was on what can we do with Kartra to make it a marketplace leader. So it can be the de facto go-to when people need something like that. So its competitors are things like ClickFunnels, Infusionsoft, Entreport, and a whole bunch of other people who are trying to be this hybrid shopping cart affiliate content management system. And this is a very fascinating consultation that we did. This is what I've noticed with clients who develop these types of software, and not just that specific vertical, almost every vertical that I've went into. And I have a lot of experience selling softwares over the years. We ended up getting out of it after we made tens and tens of millions of dollars because I didn't like the drag. What I meant by that was all the programmers, all the developers, all the designers. It's a different style. It's a different job. I knew how to sell the hell out of software, and I liked that, but the tail on it was tough. And what I had broken down to Andy on this consult, it's hard to hear this, especially if you're the founder, because typically people are looking at how can I build a better product? And better is measured essentially in my feature set is more robust and more efficient than the next guy's. And here are the problems with getting into a feature race, if you will, is features are only incremental improvements at best. So your page speed loads a 1/10 of a second faster than that guy's page speed. Whoop-de-doo, right? Your emails slightly get delivered better in the system than the next person's. You have drag and drop features to build pages, which are a little bit easier than the next person's. So here are the 2 biggest issues with going too deep into the features. This doesn't mean we neglect features, mind you, but to make features your main advantage in the marketplace is challenging for 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is consumers have challenges understanding the nuanced difference between one feature and the next. On the outside looking in, before they pay you money and do business with you, they really don't have any clue on your advantages there. It's hard for them to understand that. And that's the first big issue. The second big issue is it's really easy for your competition to copy you. It's really simple. You come up with some awesome innovation and next week it'll be in everybody else's product. So the edge you gain from having an incremental advantage over somebody else is lost very quickly. It's not a real long-term advantage. And so I did an analysis of all of his competition, and everybody was essentially saying the same thing. It was you could rearrange the logos on the web pages and you would barely notice the difference. And a lot of the big differences of why some of these companies were getting traction were more because of personality choices as opposed to feature consideration. What I mean by that is people like this style better than that style. And yeah, you can fragment a market that way and you can pick up certain market segments, but you will never dominate the market if you do that. You want to have the best position possible, the unassailable position, that it's a value monopoly, if you will. You have tied up the market so powerfully that you can do more for that market because you're in that strategic position. So you have more to invest in that customer. You have more to support that customer, more to stay on the cutting edge on behalf of that customer because happier customers spend more money with you. It's as simple as that. And so we sat there and it took us 4 hours out of an 8-hour consult to come up with the positioning. First, I had to sell him on the idea of the positioning because one of the things that Andy was talking about is he has this really cool feature in Kartra, which is what he referred to as behavioral adaptive marketing. And it's really powerful. It's this person goes to your website and they don't take this action, then the next time they go back, show them this instead of that. Or if they open up this email and they go here, then follow up with that email. And it seems like an advantage because to power users, which are the minority of any market segment, there's very little difference in terms of the value of that clientele. That's not your main market segment. And so I said to him, I said, the problem is your market doesn't look at that as an advantage. They look at it as a disadvantage. Now I got to write 4 sets of emails. Now I got to have 3 versions of the homepage. I can't even get 1, much less 3. That's going to be too much, too hard. That's a nice, if you need it, it's there. It's a little extra benefit after you acquire the customer, but the market is made or lost on getting the customer, not what you do after the customer. Getting the customer is the hardest thing. In this particular instance, nobody really likes using the platform they're using. Nobody likes it. Everybody complains about its disadvantages, but they don't switch because they took the time to get used to it. So it's hard to get people to switch from one platform to another. So then you got to try to get people that aren't on a platform at all to get into a platform. So you got to make 2 cells. Cell number 1 that they need a platform, and then cell number 2 that they need your platform. And that's also challenging too. So we spent 4 hours coming up with the positioning of what would resonate with a client as soon as they saw it. That was a blue ocean, so to speak, that you could own outright and specifically that they could instantly get, know, and then want to try you out. And then your competition couldn't copy it because they'd have to churn in a different direction than the direction they're already going down. And we came up with this concept of this is your best digital employee that you could ever have. The whole thing of it is, hey, you're ready to go hire somebody. Who should you hire first? Well, should it even be a person? And then we could show constantly and consistently throughout the marketing how this would be the best employee you could ever hire in terms of how it would be free for you. And we even started going down the route of when you logged into the interface of the software, it would keep an account of all the hours of work it had saved you and translate that into how much you gained in productivity from this employee. You don't have this employee? Ooh, I could see how that's tough for you because this employee does this, it does that. So it allows your marketing to take thematically on a whole different flavor than everybody else in that market. But the takeaway here is, how do I position what I have to offer so it's incomparable to everybody else and the end user can get it immediately as soon as they hear it and want it? Be willing to try it out. And that's a very powerful strategy. So that was the first lesson for you, is strategic positioning. It's the ingredients that make the meal. So before you cook the meal, get the best ingredients. Number 2, Mr. Charles Poliquin, the strength sensei. He was maybe the most quoted person in Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Body. And really anybody who knows him in the strength training field. He's maybe one of the greatest kept secrets. He has suffered from what I call the curse of absolute authority. The guy was so good at what he did that he spent most of his time just doing the thing. He was massively in demand at a personal level. He was unfortunately too tied up being the best at what he was that he didn't have a chance to market himself to a wider lens. And so Charles hired me for a variety of different things. One of the main things he paid me to do some consulting for was to increase memberships to his membership site. And I love situations like this because he was selling it based off the brunt of his reputation. Even though he was the best kept secret, it's hard to keep it a secret. And a lot of people were signing up for his monthly reoccurring membership site, which had workouts in it, training, resources, and so forth. It didn't even have a sales letter. So you'd go to his main website and then there'd be like a link to join the dojo or something like that. And it was like a list of a couple things you got and then a buy button. So we just need to create a sales letter where no sales letter existed before. We had a wonderful team around him. This is also what's great when you work with a personality like that, is real recognize real. I think that's one of the reasons he hired me as well. I'm not a big consulting guy. It doesn't really justify its cost for me of opportunity. Even if I'm making $25,000 in a day, it just doesn't justify it on its own because I could be making more money doing other things that have more tail to them, more leverage to them. I like it because it connects me with people and that helps with my creativity. It keeps me sharp and it's a nice variance. And then I get to tell stories like this. And so Charles sought me out. He saw in me something that made him feel like I was the best at what I did. No bull, got down to it. So he hired me. And so we were working through this thing of let me get every single proof element I can, because Charles was in every magazine you could think of at any point in time. He was quoted in all sorts of books. This is the other challenge of raw absolute authority, is they don't tell you that they've done all of these things because it's normal for them. And I don't care if people know you, don't know you, you put your best foot forward in your marketing. And so we were assembling all of these. And I had instructed his team, because they had a Facebook group. I said, you go through it. I don't care if it's 1,000 pages or 2,000 pages, and you find every interesting thing that every member has ever said that has been useful or helpful to them for the membership site. And I said, there's 2 values to that. Value number 1 is we put that in the sales letter if possible. Number 2, though, is it speaks to what is truly appreciated in the membership site, so we can write to that in terms of headlines, subheadlines, bullet points, copy, so on and so forth. And so I saw the opportunity there to grow this membership site 10-fold, 20-fold, 50-fold, because if it was working in spite of the marketing, not because of it, oh my goodness, what happens when we put that on the table? Now, when I get in there, it's kind of like exploratory surgery with clients, as you start to see other opportunities as well that are low-hanging fruit, high leverage. One thing that I noticed, and it was on their list too, on the roadmap that I prioritized for them, is Charles's email newsletter was more corporate or impersonal, and it wasn't personal. So it came from a company, not an individual. Now, it doesn't mean you should always make it from an individual, but in this particular case, with his charisma and with his personality and the nature of the industry, I had suggested to them that they start creating a personal email outreach as opposed to a corporate one. And you don't do it overnight. It's a transition process over a period of time with a clever rollout strategy, the likes of which I can't get into in this video. It'd take far too long. Maybe that's another video for another day. If you want that, go ahead and put that into the comments and I can create it one day. So we were working on what that plan could look like as well, because emails come from individuals. Generally speaking, that's the use case, right? Like your grandmother doesn't email you from a corporation. So we would prefer in that situation to have an individual email go out, and I was showing them how they could source material so Charles wouldn't have to write the emails, but they would sound like they came exactly from Charles, and they were excited and they were keen about that. What's funny is the first thing they really brought me in to work with them on was the certification program. So Charles was working with a company, but it's like one of the biggest, if not the biggest, certification program companies in the whole wide world. So instantaneously, he would be out there in all of these different places. Now, the challenge with that is it needs its own style of marketing. When you're not marketing to the end user, you have to realize there's a different set of stakes involved. So the end user is the end customer, right? I'm going to sell this to you and you can decide whether you want to buy it or not. You better come up with some pure, real hard-hitting marketing in that instance, because people are voting specifically with their wallets and with nothing else. When you're marketing to gatekeepers, people that can decide whether or not to anoint you as the program of choice or anoint somebody else, it doesn't come down to what is more valuable. Unfortunately, it doesn't come down to even what is going to make the most money for the association, because usually the people that are making these decisions, they're like middle managers. They're not at the top of the food chain. The top people, they care about the bottom line. The middle people care about other things. And you got to treat it like marketing. You build a marketing campaign, but the outcome isn't the same style of marketing. You have to know what these people need the most, whether it's related to the program or not, and how they make decisions, and how you can show up and be somebody that is valuable to them in and of yourself, what to speak of whether they make you the certification program or not. So we market to a different set of needs, and I was walking them through the process of how to develop that and how to create that. And essentially what happens is in those situations is you're flying blind in those instances, so you have to sit down with these decision makers and uncover some of these hot buttons and these points and listen to them and figure it out and then design the marketing program for that. That's one of those high stakes situations where if it works, you go from nothing to everywhere overnight. It's not something you should count on, because when your fate is in the hands of 1 or 2 or 3 individuals and not a whole market, easy come, easy go. It's very dangerous. So I was helping them also manage the expectations of whether or not this thing hits, here are the other things we need to be working on simultaneously. The last thing that I had kind of instructed his team to do is start to capture what I was referring to as Charlesisms. And I was explaining to them how these could be emails, these could be tweets, these could be YouTube videos, these are the things that are on podcasts, make them go viral, and so on and so forth. And so one of the things that Charles said to me is that people want to haul past to eat carbs. And I thought that was good. And then he would say things like more excuses than a pregnant nun. So I'm like, oh, how do we bring this out and make this interesting and use this in our marketing as well? But the bottom line here on this one, it's multifold, but if you can be in a situation where you can work with somebody who's selling extremely well because of how good they are, not because of their marketing, you add marketing on top of that, and that's really swimming downstream. That makes all of everything else a lot easier, and it's a lot more forgiving. You could screw up most of it and still be super successful. So seek to work in environments where even doing it mostly wrong can be effective, perspective, and then over time add in some of the right layers. I think it'll do very well. Number 3, Mr. Sean Stevenson. If you don't know Sean, look him up on YouTube. He is this small little guy that packs a big punch. Now, Sean came, he spent $5,000 to come to an in-person training that I did called Genius Webinars with my friend Joe Polish at Joe's Genius Network headquarters. We sold out. And Sean had came because he wanted to add to his ability to speak from stage to sell also from stage. They're similar, but yet they're so different. And Sean is infinitely a better speaker from stage than I am. Selling is a different skill set, and so it has a different set of techniques. It's a whole different mindset, by the way. And the real thing is bridging the gap between the two. So if everybody knows you as the speaker that speaks from stage and you've never pitched in your life, if you start pitching, even if your pitches are the very best, it's a weird thing. They're like, whoa, okay, hold on. What is this guy now? I'm not used to that. Something's off, and it now feels unsafe. So even building that bridge of how do you make it low stakes, no stakes, so you could practice this out. In fact, what I had suggested to Sean, and I've suggested this to everybody, it's so obvious that it's easy to overlook, is I said, engineer a situation where you just tell your audience, hey, I want to improve this ability that I have because I have things I could sell you that right now I don't. And if I sold them to you, I believe if you're the right fit, they would be the very best things for you. But I've allowed my own limitations to get in the way of that because I'm afraid that if I come here and I sell you this thing, you're going to think now I'm a different person than I was before, and that could potentially interfere with any advice I had previously given you. So here's the deal. Help me out. Just be an audience for me to practice. If you want to buy something, buy something. You don't have to, though. The point is I just need an audience so I can start working my pitch muscles. And so we had been working through a campaign where it would have landed like that. I saw a podcast on YouTube with Chris Voss and with Jocko Willink, and Jocko had Chris on. The whole premise of the thing was no is better than yes, essentially. Chris's thing is get to the no. Do you have a problem with this? Is better than do you agree with this? And on an individual level of negotiation, he is 100% correct. I believe that a no is better than a yes. Instead of does that make sense? You say, is anything confusing to you? And there's a whole variety of reasons. You could watch this podcast with Jocko if you want to get into it, or better yet, read his book, Split the Difference. But he was working with Sean and I was working with Sean, and we were in direct conflict with each other because when you're selling to groups, it's my estimation that a yes is better than a no. And so in fact, one of the trainings that I teach on my webinars is to set a yes frame. Is before you go into the presentation offer, you get several yeses in short order, 6 to 12, because it puts somebody in the mind state to move forward towards something as opposed to move away from something. So the cookie cutter ones is, did you enjoy our time together? Yes. Did you learn something here today that you didn't know before? Yes. Would you say our time together is well spent? Yes. Are you excited to go out and try some of these new techniques? Yes. Okay, well then you can go into the presentation. Now here's why I think yes is still preferable to no in a mass setting where you're selling one to many, as the title of my book is called, because you don't have the ability to calibrate at an individual level. So if you want to calibrate at an individual level, you work with the no's. If you're selling in mass, you do yeses. Now, to Chris's credit, I have become less concerned about whether my questions are framed as yes or no. I think the most important thing is once somebody is connected with you, you're asking them questions, whether the answer is yes or no. You're checking in with the audience from time to time, which I think people miss in a presentation setting. They feel like they're talking too much at their audience as opposed to having a conversation with their audience. But Sean had made this his test. He absolutely was out there testing the hell out of no's versus yes in a variety of situations, and he was playing Chris and I against each other. He'd send Chris a voice message saying, hey, what do you think of this? And he'd send it to me, hey, Chris says this, what do you think of this? I mean, it's all fun and game. None of us have this big ego here. We'd rather be rich than right. So I'm happy if I'm wrong and I learn something, and then I am more effective at communications and help more people as a result. But we never saw the conclusion to that. Sean was our only student that was going to test one of us versus the other one and see what was going to happen. If you're up for the test, let me know. Try it out and let me report the findings, because if it discovered that at a mass webinar model, asking 6 no's before you go into a pitch is better, I'll be the first to start using it, and I'll come back and I'll update the book. All right. So that was the big lesson though with Sean, is just because you're really good at something over here doesn't mean you can immediately put it over there. Even though things are very similar, there's some distinct differences between the two. And I think this thing with Chris brings it home further. The context of the thing can drastically change the technique used, even if it is such a slight difference in context. Lastly, Bob Proctor here. All-time longest teacher of personal development. Before he passed, he was something like 53 years deep in the science of self-help. Just the absolute legend. Had probably reached more people, helped more people, done for more people in that field than anybody else. And I got to know Bob specifically because at first he was brought in from my friend Marco who had brokered a deal. He was like, these people, they learned the thinking of wealth, and then they need an application in a specific business model. And so Bob became one of our top affiliates promoting some of our products that gave people a specific business model. So Bob would essentially open them up to more abundance, and then we'd give them a specific vehicle to apply this newfound thought and feeling and vibration out of. One of the things that they did was his company brought us in to help their consultants. So they had these consultants that were thinking into results, was the name of the program. And it allowed you to essentially have a license to all of Bob's materials, of which there are vast. So high quality products, unbelievable amount of wealth of an ocean of knowledge. And then you have the ability to resell that essentially. I'm paraphrasing here. There's more to it than that, but just to help you out on this short video here, which is not that short anymore. Do you like these longer videos, by the way? I know that they're not as highly scripted and as slick as some of these other YouTubers out there, but hopefully the insight makes up for that. So let me know in the comments on that. But they brought us in to help their consultants sell these products to the end user. So these consultants would go out there and they would like cold call local businesses and such, and they would say, we're going to help you install this thinking into your organization, and we're going to provide you these tools in terms of these work products, as I call them work products. They're just information products or different resources that they could use, that they could switch on for the company. I've seen this with many consulting companies that I've worked with or who have hired me. It is the number one problem over and over again that I encounter working with these companies, is they place too much emphasis on the value of the product and little to none on the marketing of the end product. And so I did some training for these consultants to help them develop their own marketing systems. And we were in works with Bob Proctor to develop a turnkey marketing system that every consultant could use. So essentially, we would script the webinars, and then we'd give them the webinar deck and all the things around it, and then the end user could customize that and then niche it to a specific market. So it's not completely done for you. That doesn't really work, because then you just have these mini clones and then there's no real value to it. It's 80% done for you. So not only do you give them the 100% done for you product over here, you give them the 80% done for you marketing system and allow them to proliferate that, and then you show them trainings on how they can use that. So we had started to do some high-level training on what they could do on their own, and then we were in negotiations to try to work out a business deal where we could create marketing material that they could use in license. Now, we never got to that conclusion at that point, but if you see a situation, you should use that same kind of lesson that I'm talking about here. There's a lot of money to be made helping consulting firms with that, or helping firms that give people done-for-you product but don't give them done-for-you marketing. But what was very interesting is along the way is Bob studied some of my stuff, and they developed the Science of Getting Rich webinar. And it's very, very awesome to me. I woke up one day, I saw the email to the webinar, and I said, hey, I like Bob. I want to see what he's doing on webinars. And I'm watching that, and then there's a transition that is used exactly word for word, slide for slide, from my book here that Bob had implemented into the webinar. And there's a phrase that I like that I use in there. I said, and if that were your only option, it would be a worthy ideal to pursue. Because it's called the two choices clause. You have two choices, essentially. You could do it alone or you could do it with us. If you do it with us, you're going to have to pay some money, but it's probably going to be more cost effective than doing it alone. So I'm just giving you the structure of the clause, and Bob used it word for word. And Bob said it was very uncomfortable for me using this structure. So not just the word for word clause there, but the whole framework of the webinar was essentially based on my training. Well, it wasn't natural for me, but it worked better than anything else that we could do. It's funny how that works. Is it doesn't have to be comfortable to you, and you'd be surprised at how little your end audience realizes your own uncomfortableness, because with the right communication flow, that trumps and drowns out a lot of these lesser things that are not as important. So communicating the idea in the most impactful way, that's levels above everything else. And so I thought that was fascinating. In closing on this video here today of the 4 consulting clients I had in 4 unique different niches with 4 unique problems that have since passed from us, so we never got to see the fruition of any of these campaigns. My hope for you is you can take this and then apply the strategies, and you can put it over the finish line for your own projects or as a consultant for other projects. And if you do that, please let me know, because I never saw it in my specific permutation that I developed. But if I can see it in yours, maybe that'll help give me some resolution here. If not, maybe it'll help give you some money. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts on this. I'll see you on the next video.